Hey y'all, it's your girl Morgan. Coming in with a reading. Hold on, let me get my light. Luckily, I was already squatting. Why you always trying to embarrass me when I get on live? Morgan. Alright. Okay. Let's see how that. Y'all can see me. Alright, so earlier I was in. Can I just say, I ain't gonna say it ain't flowing, but it ain't. I ain't gonna say it ain't what I thought it was gonna be, because I don't think I know what I thought it was gonna be. I just thought Jenifer was gonna be extra dramatic, but even though I am a thespian and I've been a part of the theater world, sometimes I feel like it get a little too detailed and too wordy for somebody that may not be a part of that lifestyle. It would probably be hard to keep up or understand or care the intricateness of the details she's giving us. But for those that are probably in her world, they probably appreciate it much more because they probably ran into some of these people or names and can relate and would appreciate the tea that she's spilling. But yes, it feel like it's taking a little second to come along for me. But my camera was doing something earlier. I think one of my alarms went off, and it said that my stuff had stopped recording, and then I had to go. So I'm going to back up a little bit to where I had left off. So we're on page 129 in chapter 7. It's part 2 of that. It's really one chapter, but it's part 2 because I broke it up and I'm reading. In February 1984, I took to the road with From Billy to Lena with Jenifer. My first booking was at North Greenville University, a small Christian university in North Carolina. It literally was the first time I performed before an audience made up of entirely strangers. No gypsies, no relatives, no fans. Was I really as good as I thought? Who would start the applause? I hardly even knew Billy McDaniels, my genius pianist. It was quite possibly the first time I was actually nervous before going on stage. The show was well received. Mark Brown co-wrote the show's monologues, and I am eternally grateful to him for creating a meaningful show that entertained and educated college audiences for a full decade of Black History Month. After every performance, I held a question and answer session with the students. This was my favorite part because I got to relax and just be myself. There might be a question or two about the show, but mostly the students wanted to hear about how I made it. I must have seemed like an exotic bird to these college kids with my 80s hair teased to the ceiling, my sequin gold lame Don Klein jumpsuit, caked blue eyeshadow, and extreme liquid black eyeliner. Many of the students came from small rural towns and had never visited New York or met a professional entertainer. I enjoyed sharing with them what I had learned and seen of the world. I wanted them to know the importance of finding their passion, working hard to fulfill their dreams, being good citizens, and above all, giving back to those less fortunate. I crisscrossed the United States doing From Billy to Lena with Jenifer, mostly at rural schools. Billy and I flew in raggedy propeller planes that served small cities. I always did my best to go through St. Louis to gorge on my mama's fried jack salmon with spaghetti before I had to catch my flight on Allegheny or Ozark Airlines. I never understood people that ate fish with spaghetti. It just don't sound like it go together to me. I personally don't want those two things at the same time. Attending services at Unity and listening to Phil Valentine had expanded my thinking, and I began to explore spirituality on my own. I really wanted to be more connected and to understand life outside of show business. To that end, I experimented with everything that was a part of the New Age movement. Being among artists meant that I was exposed to all sorts of new ideas. Artists was discontent by nature. We are thrill seekers who are hip and in the know and are often the first to open up to new ways of thinking. Unity's philosophy of say yes, which had resonated so deeply for me, evolved into a general appreciation for positive thinking after reading The Greatest Salesman by Og Mandino. The book moved me to think about the possibility that I, not an unforeseen force, was in control of my life. I began to practice the breath of fire technique in Kundalini yoga class and learned to sit still long enough to meditate. No easy task for me, I assure. No easy task for me either. Look, there's this book I picked up, Abundance, The Inner Path to Wealth by Deepak Chopra, and it wasn't what I expected. From the time you open this book until I ain't even that far along, page 9, he's just talking about how, like, yoga is interconnected with, like, your money. and how like people that have an Indian background, a lot of them are really into, yoga practices, like it's a part of their everyday life type deal. But apparently it's something about that mind body soul connection of this deep breath and moving of your body that just gets you aligned. It just allows for the abundance to flow to you. So there's something in that. I'm gonna finish this book and incorporate it in my life, and we're gonna see how it flows, okay? All right. Perhaps the most important book for me at the time was Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine, in which she chronicled her exploration of New Age spirituality. The book brought ridicule to MacLaine for her talk of aliens and trance channeling. In her speech after winning the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress for her role in Terms of Endearment, MacLaine said, "If you can dream it, you can make it happen." I was hooked. Shirley was famous, and I wanted her recipe for success. Fast forward to 2000. I walked on stage for one of my one-woman shows and immediately spotted a head full of red hair sitting 6th row center. It was Shirley MacLaine. Need I say, I performed my ass off that night. I wasted no time at the end of the show pointing out that she was indeed in the house and had been an influence on me and my spiritual journey. When she came backstage after the show, she embraced me, pulled back, and held me by the shoulders. "That was the best show I've ever seen," she said. I wrinkled my face a little thinking, Sinatra, Sammy, Judy, me? And then she repeated herself, ever. She said something else I'll never forget. "Your landscapes are vast." Well, let's just say after that, I never gave a flying fuck what anybody had to say about anything. After Shirley's amazing compliment, she invited me to walk with her on the beach early the next morning. Trust me, I wouldn't get up there early for nobody but Shirley MacLaine and her dog. She said to me, "I have one question for you. Why aren't you the biggest star in the world?" I looked at her and said, "I am the biggest star in the world." I knew she understood. I was beyond excited to be cast as a featured performer in Harlem Story, which was conceived by Peter Herbelziner, a German arranger and conductor known for bringing American jazz artists to perform with his orchestra in Cologne. Harlem Story was a musical review of works written or recorded by African American jazz and gospel artists. A producer friend assembled an impressive company of gypsies and Broadway actors, including Claire Bassett, Vondi Curtis Hall, Connie Brazelton, Ty Stevens, Yolanda Graves, and Roxanne Reese. I soloed in a scene featuring songs made famous by Bessie Smith and a medley of songs by U.B. Blake. It was wonderful to be away from New York City. I strolled along the Rhine River and visited the city's Gothic Cologne Cathedral. On the downside, I found the German food inedible and mostly ate McDonald's. I seriously thought about remaining in Europe to do the whole Josephine Baker thing. She was the first black person to become a world-famous entertainer and to star in a movie. In the 1920s, Baker fled American racism and became the toast of Paris. But never being good with languages, I took my ass back to New York. I wrote a series of shows with Mark Brown and David Holgride, including Jenifer Lewis and the Cosmos, which was a celebration and a send-up of my spiritual search. We three also wrote Jenifer Lewis Broke and Freaking Out, which is self-explanatory. Unlike my earlier solo endeavors, these shows had a through line, and thanks to Mark, a lot of commentary about current events and politics. I also unveiled characters such as Little Jenny Lewis and a Baptist pastor. The shows at Don't Tell Mama were mostly sold out Tuesday through Saturday nights. The 8 o'clock show usually was full of tourists. The 11 o'clock show would be filled with savvy New Yorkers and Broadway gypsies who just come off stage at whatever show they were performing. The Dream Girls gypsies came damn near every night. Occasionally I get out of town bookings at places such as the Trautham Door in Buffalo, New York, and the Pilgrim House in Provincetown, Massachusetts. I did private parties in the Poconos and even went back to Kinloch for a Homegirl Makes Good concert. I was asked to do a benefit performance for an AIDS charity at Studio 54. The legendary disco was just a block from where I live, but it was my first time there, and it would be my last. I was there to work. I didn't go to clubs to socialize, not disco clubs anyway. I wore a silver lame jumpsuit designed by Don Klein and a big, fabulous vampirist mask. The famous husband and wife comedy duo, Stiller and Miera, introduced me on stage to perform Blackuella. It went a little something like this. My name is Blackuella, and you are my prey. Don't tell me you gave at the office. Don't tell me you gave at the office, because I don't drink during the day. I hope you're without a date tonight. You want me to tell you why? Because I'm going to pick you up and dust you off, then drain you till you're dry. Why? I'm a vampire. John Boyd, who had won the Best Actor Oscar a few years earlier, was in the audience that night, and I could see him eyeing me. Later, he asked me to dance, and we did scandalously to Annie Lennox's Sweet Dreams. She probably gonna do John. Y'all know she do every damn body, it seemed like. Just like. At the end of the night, John and I walked to Central Park and took a romantic carriage ride. We admired the moon and the reflection of the illuminated skyline off the lake. I love a good sit up under the moon by lakeside. That's why I be taking my means sometimes when I get to know a guy. We're gonna do something I like. I don't wanna always be cooped up in some restaurant let's go sit by a lakeside. Can you hold a conversation about a lakeside? We admired the moon and the reflection of the illuminated skyline off the lake. We talked about being from families of hard workers. We stared into each other's eyes and kissed. We went to his room, what I told you, on the 35th floor of the Essex house. I was spellbound by his sensitivity and kindness. He ordered cognac and caviar. Let's just say he was a real midnight cowboy. He walked me the 6 blocks to my apartment the next morning. I wanted so badly for one of the gypsies to see me with John Voight. But gypsies don't get up that early. I began to develop a more mature, professional performance. I had learned so much from that, like the technique of getting the audience laughing hard and then changing the mood on a dime and dropping some knowledge. And I found myself comfortable enough to improvise based on what was going on with the audience. I'd give latecomers sass from the stage. What time did your ticket say? You missed my first 3 numbers, which I did naked. If you have ever seen one of my stage shows, you know I love to fuck with everybody. Jenifer, the audience member, returning to her seat from the ladies' room. You there in the red dress. Everything taken care of? Audience member, completely baffled and embarrassed. Huh? Jenifer, could you still hear me in the ladies' room? You know they've got a speaker in there. Now playing along. No, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Well, we heard you. But don't get me wrong, I'm no Don Rickles. For the most part, I am the butt of my own jokes. It was nothing for me to walk the halls of my apartment building looking to bum a cigarette. With my head wrapped and wearing a fuzzy robe, I'd knock on a neighbor's door regardless of whether I knew them. One time when I knocked on a strange door, it was opened by the Hollywood musical star Jane Powell. I immediately recognized her, and after chatting a bit, I invited myself into her penthouse. She was gracious and lovely and told me I was a sweet girl. Thank goodness she didn't live next door to my loud ass. One day, I knocked on 4D. A cute guy answered the door and soon produced a cigarette. You got a light? I asked, and he presented a lighter. Then I said, I'm Jenifer Lewis, a diva. We'll have to meet again when it's not so morning and not so ugly. A couple of weeks later, the guy and I were riding in the same elevator. This time, I was in full beat and dressed to kill. When he made eye contact with me, I said, see? That was how I met Lee Summers, a wonderful friend, actor, and singer. He was in the original cast of Dreamgirls. One of our favorite things to do together was people watching. Like the time we were sitting at an outdoor cafe and saw a man running away from a taxi driver. He'd stiff for a fare. Poor bastard slipped and fell on his face, and in unison we sang, Karma, Karma Jackson, that bitch will get you every time. Then we fell out with laughter. It didn't take long for me to know that I loved Lee and his singing voice. When the opportunity arose to headline for a week at a swank club in Monte Carlo, Monaco, I wasted no time asking him to join me singing backup with my friend Todd Hunter, an amazing dancer. Monaco was memorable for a number of reasons. I even met Grace Kelly's son, Prince Albert, who currently is the small country's reigning monarch. But Monaco will always stand out for me because I was there when the AIDS crisis really broke open in the U.S. media. One day I decided to go ahead and sleep with the club's gorgeous maitre d' after that night's show. Then someone phoned and told me that Luther Vandross had AIDS. He had lost a lot of weight, and as a result, this rumor was born. During this period, people were paranoid. Anyone who had lost weight or suddenly fell ill was rumored to have the virus. Nonetheless, when I heard that, did I put on the brakes on the maitre d'? I had heard someone on the news say something to the effect of, whomever you slept with, you have essentially slept with everyone they have slept with for the last 7 years. I said to a friend, honey, I want you to book me a flight around the world. Put it on the credit card, because I'm a dead bitch. Oh, Jenifer. Of course, I had been aware of HIV and AIDS for some time. The plague hit the entertainment community, especially the world of black gay gypsies, like a freight train. In those years, you knew what was coming when yet another call began with, sit down, Jenifer, I have some bad news. It started slowly at first. Curtis Worthy Jr., a castmate from Mahalia, passed away. A couple months later, Jeremy Grimes, a dancer I knew through Shirley Black Brown, died. Then we bore helpless witness as our friends started to die, 2 or 3 in 1 week. For God's sake, they dropped like flies. Another dancer, another hairstylist, another costume designer. By now, I understood that the rare form of pneumonia that killed Will B. Abel was no longer rare, and that he was among the nation's earliest victims of AIDS. By the time I returned from doing my show in Monaco, the entire United States was in an uproar. President Reagan had finally mentioned AIDS publicly for the first time, but those SOBs in the government did almost nothing to address or remedy the situation, probably because it was mostly gay men, drug users, and poor people who were dying. But then Americans began to freak out when it became clear that heterosexuals, women, and children were also at risk. I recall watching Ted Koppel's town hall on the AIDS crisis. We were glued to the television. Come on, you SOBs, do something. It was a horrible time. The following month, the legendary creator of Dreamgirls, Michael Bennett, died. The Broadway community was devastated, and groups like Equity Fights AIDS and Broadway Cares were organized to raise money and to push the government to do more for AIDS research and treatment. To try to alleviate our feelings of helplessness, my friends and I came up with an idea called Divas for Dollars. For several Saturday nights, when the gay spots were jumping, a few of us gypsies, including Sharon McKnight, Karen Mason, Lena Petrakis, Nancy Lamont, and Amy Ryder, popped in to perform a couple of songs before we passed the hat for AIDS relief and research. It wasn't much, but I like to think that we made a difference. I cursed at God as the AIDS toll mounted, and not just in New York City. During Black History Month, when I toured the college circuit from Billy to Lena with Jenifer, I was often asked back by the same schools year after year. Usually when I'd arrive in a small town to perform at the local campus, I'd immediately go to the black hair salon, hoping to find a gay man who would appreciate my divaness and get my hair teased and snatched for the show. But far too often I'd return to a salon I'd used the previous year only to learn their sole gay male stylist had passed away. The plague had reached small-town America. It was relentless and horrible. The reality of just how many friends and colleagues of mine were very sick or had passed away was overwhelming. The relentless epidemic claimed nearly 200 of my friends and coworkers in the span of about 11 years. Roderick Siebert and Breland Daniels from the Yulee Tour, Tony Franklin and Larry Stewart from the Dreamgirls original cast, Philip Gilmore from the Dreamgirls Broadway revival, Jerry Blatt and Ed Love from Detour 83, Carl Weaver. I think she had some going on with Ed. Carl Weaver from Rock and Roll, the first 5,000 years. 3 of my favorite hairstylists, Stanley Crowe, Jerry Terrell, and Michael Robertson. Sharon Redd, who had been in Harlot in the 70s. Robert Melvin, Stanley Ingram, Chris Vaughn, Keith McDaniel, Mark McChesney, Craig Frawley. There are just too many to name. The trauma of their suffering and their untimely and unnecessary deaths haunt me to this day. In late January, Quitman gave me terrible news. He was leaving New York City for San Francisco. I went all the way off. A screaming, crying, snot-filled breakdown. He said he was going out west to find someone to produce the musical he'd been working on for years. I cussed him out for losing hope and leaving. I did not know what I would do without him nearby. Quitman was always in my heart and on my mind. Had I paid more attention a few weeks earlier when Quitman told me the doctor had found nodules on his neck, I would have understood the real reason he felt he needed to be in San Francisco, which had become a mecca for HIV research and treatment. Throughout the next 2 years, he was in and out of the hospital very ill, and he was deeply depressed. I remember calling him to tell him how well things were going with a series I was working on, Crosstown, but he was not in the mood. He didn't want to hear about how I was doing all the things he had dreamed of doing, which now we both knew he would never do. I tried to raise Quitman's mood. Changing subjects, I began to regale him with stories of all the guys I'd been dating in Hollywood. He cut me off. Stop it, Jenifer. I don't want to hear about all the sex you're having. I was so sad for him and for myself. I didn't know what to say. I was working hard and looked forward to the still almost daily silent phone call from Quitman. God, how I loved him. We laughed and cried together as always. Around Christmas time, I remember discussing the death of Sylvester, the gay disco music icon, at only age 41. A couple of days later, we repeated the call, but this time it was Max Robinson, the first African-American anchor of a national news program, cut down at age 49. One morning in early January, the bedside phone jarred me awake at 3 a.m. Quitman spoke slowly, the fear in his voice nearly palpable. I'm in the hospital, Jen. I'm sick. This time I think I'm real sick. My friend Beverly Heath drove most of the early 8 hours it took to reach the hospital in Oakland. The nurse told me not to touch or hug Quitman. Confusion still remained about how the HIV virus was spread. I entered the dimly lit room where Quitman lay still in bed. Then Adonis, this god, whose body could leap as high as Mount Everest, lay there, covered in purple lesions. I stepped forward and touched Quitman's face and took his hand. He whispered, "Oh, Jen, you're the first person to touch me without wearing gloves in 2 years." I held myself together long enough to laugh and joke with Quitman a little. The nurses would not allow me to stay in the room for more than a few minutes. By the time I got to the parking lot, I was falling apart. I saw red, then I saw black, because all I could see was death. In the car, I screamed, clutching my chest and banging the dashboard. I asked Beverly to drive to a liquor store while I walked around like I was shopping for shoes. My eyes fell on a bottle of Wild Turkey, which I had never heard of but bought anyway. Back in the car, I turned the bottle up and chugged the burning liquid, needing to erase the image of my friend rotting to death. As we drove to the home of Beverly's friends, where we would spend the night, Beverly said, "You're grieving, Jenifer, and I understand, baby, but there's something more. Something's wrong." I was too distraught to make much conversation with the lovely couple who were opening their home to us. As Beverly stirred the gumbo dinner, I dialed the kitchen wall phone to call Mark and Bobby to tell them about Quitman. But before I could even say a word, Mark blurted, "Jenny, I'm glad it's you. Clyde Benson died." Clyde had been my acting coach a few years earlier in New York. It was all too much. I collapsed to the floor and crawled under the kitchen table, holding myself in a ball and sobbing into my knees. Beverly calmly looked down at me as she continued to stir with the long wooden spoon. Beverly gently, "What are you doing under the table, Jenny?" Me looking up and screaming, "I don't know. Don't leave me. Just don't leave me." Beverly a bit less gently, "Jenny, get your ass up off this floor." Me, I can't move, Beverly." Beverly, "Jenny, you gotta listen to me, baby. Something is going on with you. Really, this is more than sadness about Quitman. You need to get professional help with this. You need to talk to somebody." Me, starting to gain composure, "Really? You think it'll help me?" Beverly, "I know it will. There's no greater journey than the journey within." Quitman's illness and the near constant news of another friend stricken with AIDS caused me to channel my grief into many AIDS causes. Over the years, I launched at least a dozen AIDS walks and performed at numerous fundraisers. No doubt, there has been progress on the AIDS front, but it saddens me that many people, gay and straight, continue to get the disease. The struggle isn't over. Ooh, all right, that tugged at my heartstrings. We're going to end there. Chapter 8 is Hollywood Not Swinging, and I'll tune in with you guys with that on another day. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Hope y'all have a good rest of y'all evening. Peace.